Hi everyone, my name is Leanne and today I'm bringing you my January wrap-up. So that is mini reviews of all of the books that I read in January, and there are 9 books to talk about today. I've got a mix of fiction, I've got non-fiction, I've got poetry. I'm going to talk about these books in the order that I read them. And the first book that I read in January was Nevermore by Jessica Townsend. I don't know if other people get this, but do you get that feeling at the start of a new reading year where you really want your first book to be a really good one so it sets the tone for the rest of the year? I made an excellent choice in picking up Nevermore as my first book of 2019 because I adored this book. This is a middle grade book about a young girl named Morrigan Crow. She lives in this town where everyone believes that she is cursed. They think that she is responsible for all of the bad things that happen in this town. And everyone believes that Morrigan is destined to die on her 11th birthday. But she doesn't. She is whisked away by a strange man named Jupiter North, and he tells her that she could be eligible to join something called the Wondrous Society if she is accepted into it. In order to be accepted into this magical and mysterious society that Jupiter North won't really tell her much about, Morrigan has to complete a number of trials, and she also has to perform something called a knack, which is essentially like a special skill. But Morrigan doesn't have one of those. As the story unfolds, we begin to unravel some of the mysteries alongside Morrigan and some of the things that she hasn't been told about the people that she's interacting with, about her own upbringing. This is such a fun middle grade read. I think what really makes a fantastic middle grade book is fantastic set pieces and memorable scenes, and this book has so many of those, particularly the Christmas scenes. I think they're really memorable as well. I read this like just after Christmas at the start of the year, so I was still like at home with all the Christmas decorations. I was still kind of in the Christmas spirit. I thought the characters were compelling. I thought the world was built really well. I'm not sure how many books are going to be in this series. I know that the second book called Wondersmith is out now. Yeah, if you are looking for a good middle grade read, I would highly recommend this one. This is probably one of the middle grade books that I've had the most connection to and the best time reading as an adult reader. I'm really excited to read the sequel. The next book that I finished was The Black Ball by Ralph Ellison. There are actually 4 short stories in this book, and it's part of the Penguin Modern series. Each of these little books only costs £1, and I've got quite a few of them now. I really enjoyed this one. These stories are about I guess enjoyed is probably the wrong word, but I found a lot of value in them. These stories are about the experiences of Black people in America at the turn of the 20th century and explores violence and injustice. But there's also a real sense of unexpected kindness and hope across these stories. I enjoyed the first 2 more than the latter 2. I thought they were written a bit better, but overall, I thought these were fantastically written stories. Ralph Ellison has a real haunting quality to his writing. There are lots of poignant observations about his subject matters as well, and I would really recommend this if you are interested in trying out some of his writing before you go on to like his novels like The Invisible Man. The next book I finished was When God Was a Rabbit by Sarah Winman, and it is very shiny. I devoured about 50% of this book on my flight from Dublin back to the UK, and I just found myself really turning the pages and wanting to see what was happening next in this novel. Even though it's not like thrilling or anything like that, I think it's a rather quiet novel, but I was so impressed with how well it was written. It follows the relationship between a brother and sister, how they take care of each other as they are growing up and into their adult life, and how the friendship between them shifts but remains so important to both of them. This novel spans 4 decades, starting in the very late 1960s. We see the opening parts of this novel through a child narrator. The sister is 9 years old at the start of this book, and I think the author really captured the way that children of that age see the world, and the naivety and innocence, and how they're discovering the world and beginning to unravel it. What really impressed me about Sarah Winman's writing is that she can really change how you see a situation with just a couple of sentences. One point in particular that I'm thinking of that I won't tell you about here because it's kind of a spoiler, but something is revealed about one of the characters and it makes you reevaluate the way you saw them, and it's just a really devastating moment. I think ultimately this is a book about love, and it's a book about familial relationships and the complexity and intimacy of them. It's beautifully written. It will really pull at your heartstrings, and I'm really looking forward to reading more of Sarah Winman's work as well. The next book I finished was a poetry collection, and it was Hold Your Own by Kate Tempest. I adore this poetry collection. I adore everything that Kate Tempest writes, but I think this was just such an impressive collection. This collection is centered and inspired, and it is a retelling of Greek mythology. But you don't need to know anything about Greek mythology to get value out of this. Like, it still makes sense if you don't know anything about it. There's a lot of exploration of gender roles throughout this collection, and that is prompted by the particular myth that Kate Tempest is focusing on in this collection. I think the character or the legend that it depicts, I think his name or their name is pronounced Tiresias, and a huge part of their story is that they are a woman at some points and they are a man at some points, and it's through that lens that Kate Tempest is able to explore a lot of things about contemporary femininity and masculinity. There's a lot of stuff about love and relationships, but also war in this collection. Such a poignant collection, and it's touching, and it's I was taken aback at so many points, because not only because the content, but the way she relays that content. She uses language masterfully, and if you are familiar with Kate Tempest's style of poetry, it's sort of quite rhyme heavy spoken word, but it also has a huge amount of technique in there as well. It's just so impressive. I really liked the poem Ballad of a Hero and Man Down. These Things I Know, and As We Followed Dinosaurs. So many poems in this collection I marked because they really stood out to me. Kate Tempest is a poet that I always recommend if you're interested in getting into poetry. So yeah, I absolutely loved this collection. Back onto some novels now. I read Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This is a proof copy. I think the final version is out in March. Yeah, the final version is out on the 7th of March, and I would highly urge you to pick up a copy because this is such a fun but impressive novel. I've read quite a few Taylor Jenkins Reid books in the past, and I was so excited to get a copy of her new novel. This is sort of framed as if it was a non-fiction account of Daisy Jones and the Six, who were a fictitious, but within the framing of the novel and it pretending to be a non-fiction piece, real band. Daisy Jones was originally a solo artist, and then she came together with this band called The Six. They are a rock band based in America in the 1970s who were tremendously successful, and the way this book is structured and told is so fun because it is told through like snippets of interviews with not only the band members, but also, you know, people they were in relationships with, managers. The idea is that like the person who is chronicling the story of this band has interviewed all of these people, and she has structured snippets from the interview so that their story is told chronologically. And what's really interesting is that you see how different characters tell different events and how they have different warped perspectives on what happened, whether that's a matter of just remembering it differently or trying to manipulate the truth. And I just found that so fun, and I really believed all of the relationships between the various band members and also the other people in their lives. You find out something towards the end of this book that really changes your perspective on the interview situation. I won't say what it is, but I didn't expect it at all. Such a fun, interesting, well done twist. There's also a lot to do in here about how female musicians are treated in the media and that kind of thing. There's a lot to do with addiction. This is such a good book. I absolutely devoured it, and because of the way it's told in those short little snippets of interviews, it is so readable and so quick to fly through. Yeah, I would just really highly recommend this one. It's probably my favorite fiction book of the month. The next book I finished was Paulina and Fran by Rachel B. Glaser. I have mixed feelings on this book. I really thought I was gonna love this book because it is a campus novel. It's about intense female friendships. It was meant to have like LGBT plus themes in there. It has quite a sexually aware main character, and that's so many boxes being ticked for me there. But there was something about this novel that just wasn't quite right for me. So in this novel, we follow the friendship between two art students, Paulina and Fran. Paulina is, she's, like I said, quite sexually aware. She knows the effect that she can have on men. She knows that she's attractive and she acts upon that. Whereas Fran is a bit more reserved and naive. Neither of them are particularly likable characters. And I think they are definitely characters that a lot of people wouldn't get on with, which is why I would be reluctant to recommend this book to someone unless I really, really knew their reading tastes would align with it, because you're just not gonna like either of these characters. Paulina is a massive show-off. She always wants to be the center of attention, and Fran is quite frustrating in her passiveness. They form this really intense friendship, which becomes more complicated when Fran takes a romantic interest in one of Paulina's exes. I do think this book is really well written. I think it's really funny, and I do think there are some great moments of insight into that period of your life, like in your early 20s. But I did find a lot of it quite unbelievable. It reminded me a lot of the TV show Skins. So if you really liked Skins, then you might like this one. What really disappointed me about this book was that I thought there would be a larger focus on the LGBT plus themes in it. I found it a bit of a letdown that wasn't as much of a focus as I'd been led to believe. I did enjoy this book. I thought it was really funny. I think a lot of it aligned with my sense of humor, but I really don't think it's for everyone. The next book I finished was Call Me By Your Name by Andre Aciman. I was so disappointed by this book. I didn't like it. So this book follows a very intense and passionate romance sexual relationship that takes place over 6 weeks over a summer in it's set in the Italian Riviera. The relationship follows the 17-year-old protagonist and his father's house guest. His family regularly take in house guests, but this particular guest our protagonist becomes quite obsessed with. I just really didn't like this book. I took huge issue with the age gap in this book. It made me very uncomfortable. I didn't think it was appropriate. I thought this book was really fake deep, which is one of my like least favorite things across any form of media. Like, just stop trying to say something poignant. There was just nothing about the relationship between these two characters that made me want to root for them. And at the same time, the massive issues in this relationship, they weren't acknowledged at all. I just don't get why people think this book is so beautiful, and I very almost DNF'd it. The only reason that I powered through was because so many people said that they loved it, and I was like, there's got to be something that makes it better, and there wasn't. This month I also listened to Stay With Me by Ayobami Adebayo. This is a book that is set in 1980s Nigeria, and it is all about the social and political circumstances in that part of the world at that particular time. It's a very turbulent time in Nigerian history, but ultimately what we are looking at in this novel are very intimate personal feelings. Our protagonist is a woman named Yejide. She desperately wants a child, as does her husband, and they have done a number of things to try and make that happen, to try and conceive, but it hasn't worked out. And people are suggesting that the husband takes another wife in order to be able to have a child, but neither of them want to do that. There is so much tragedy surrounding our main character's relationship with motherhood and marital intimacy. This is such a heartbreaking book. There are so many twists and turns and jaw-dropping moments in this novel without it being like exploitative of trauma. It's really fantastically told. I think you really get a sense of the perspectives of all the different characters while having a huge amount of affection for you, Jade. Just such a heartbreaking book, but I think it's a really important one. I think it does a fantastic job of conveying cultural experiences in Nigeria. There are so many memorable moments in this book, and I would just highly recommend it. Final book I finished was a non-fiction book, and it is called Just Eat It by Laura Thomas. This is a proof copy that I was very kindly sent by Pan Macmillan, but the final copy looks like this, and it's out now. This is a book all about what is called intuitive eating, and the book does a much better job of explaining what that is than I will, but essentially intuitive eating is a bit like going back to the way you ate as a child. When a child eats, they stop when they are full, and if they don't want to eat something, they don't eat it. It's about understanding your body and your relationship with hunger, being able to recognize the signs of being hungry. It's about not overthinking what you're eating, not feeling guilt about what you're eating. This book is very much anti-diet culture. I think that is so important. Intuitive eating is all about combating restricted eating. I think if you are someone who even struggles with your relationship with food and eating and dieting even slightly, there will be something in this book that benefits you. But even if you don't have those particular struggles, I think it would also help you understand society's wider attitudes towards food and body image. There's really practical tools and activities in this book for sort of recalibrating your mind and how you think about what you're eating. I didn't find all of the activities in this book helpful, but I would still say there's a lot of value in it, even if you don't want to carry out those activities. And the author does a great job of asserting that not everything that she suggests is going to be for you, and that everyone's relationship with their body and their food is different. The author is very well informed about what she's writing about. She's got a PhD, and she debunks a lot of like bad science surrounding like weight and food and nutrition. And I think this book did a fantastic job of acknowledging the concept of disordered eating as opposed to like a diagnosed eating disorder. I do personally struggle with my relationship with food quite a bit, so I found a lot of the stuff in here quite helpful. Not all of it, because I'm not someone that I've never dieted. My difficult relationship with food isn't anything to do with body image or calories, but I still saw my own experiences reflected in what she's talking about, and I had some of my feelings that had never been acknowledged by a professional before acknowledged through her writing, and I thought this was really great. I genuinely think this book has the power to change people's lives. Like, that sounds really like tacky, but I really think it's important. So that's all of the 9 books that I read in January. If you've read any of these, do leave a comment down below and let me know what you've thought of them. As ever, all of these books will be linked down below in the description box if you want to learn more about them, or if you want to get your hands on a copy. Also, if you want to keep up with my reading between wrap-ups, then the best place to do that is on Instagram, and that's also linked down below in the description. I frequently post on my Instagram stories what I'm reading on that particular day. So yeah, that's all I'm going to talk about for now, but I hope you guys are well, and I will talk to you in my next video.